Hi HR Nation, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today we're joined by Arnaud Teil, Vice President of HR at Pure Storage. Welcome to the show, how are you?
Doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Tell everyone a little bit more about you personally and the current organization that you work for in case people aren't aware of the business.
I'm from Europe originally. I moved to the US several years ago, 25 years actually. I spent my first few years when I moved in the US into retail. I was a store manager here in the Bay Area. I first started at a register helping customers and then moved as along the chain and became a store manager. Now at some point I decided I wanted to do something else. So I moved into Cisco. At the time they were looking for someone who could speak French and help customers in Canada. I was based here in the Bay Area, but I traveled a lot in Canada. And my job at the time was really to make their life easier, large customers into Cisco. It was early 2000. So, the internet was booming. And I ended up spending almost 19 years at Cisco. So
wow.
Years at Cisco. That's where I came into HR at Cisco. And after 19 years, I finally decided, okay, now it's time for another adventure. And I've been at Pure for the past 3 years, and I really love it. I wanted a company earlier in the life cycle. And, what we do is really, we're in the IT infrastructure business and data services, data management. So we help customers with modernization of their storage infrastructure operations and applications. And so they can make the best use of their data in any type of cloud. So private, public, hybrid, you name it.
Most people that I speak to that work at Cisco have been there a long time.
Yes.
Because there's so many career opportunities and development opportunities. You can be there for a long time.
And that's one of their differentiators, right? As a brand, talent brand, you can have multiple careers. So, an opportunity came up. Someone who used to work with me at the retail company called me one day and say, hey, they're looking for someone to work with customers. And one of the requirements is to speak French. So I interviewed and that's how I started at Cisco. And it was I had a great time there, to your point, multiple careers. But the thread has always been, Chris, for me, how can we make life simpler and easier for customers? And at the time when I started at Cisco, that was really about that. We had very large service providers. The internet was booming, things were going crazy, and they just needed to grow their business. And if you're large customers at Cisco at the time, a company that was growing really fast, it really needed someone who could be an advocate for you within the company, working with finance, manufacturing, sales, logistics, etc. So it was an awesome experience, and I did that for 6 years with multiple jobs within those 6 years, including the first Sarbanes-Oxley certification when that thing came up, and I decided then to go into manufacturing because I wanted to learn something new. But all of that was becoming very deep in terms of expertise, right? So manufacturing, supply chain is great. It's actually fascinating.
Oh, it's very fascinating. I used to run Europe's largest manufacturing and supply chain conference.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I used to speak to manufacturing and supply chain executives on the biggest brands in the world every day for many, many years. And it was super fascinating. Yes, it's my co-founder, Shane, was close to actually training to become a supply chain manager, obviously, and pursue that career route. Luckily for me, he didn't go down that route and he stayed here, but it was very fascinating. Yeah, he's with me now. Yeah. But it was very, very interesting. Yeah. It's fascinating.
It's complex. So I really liked it. I felt that areas that are very specialized, because it is, you need to go really deep, right? In terms of experience and expertise. And it probably wasn't where I wanted to land. I wanted something, people talk about the T-shaped leaders or T-shaped professionals, right? So the breadth and the depth. I was getting a lot of depth there, but I wanted something broader. And I always thought about HR because HR has actually that unique, there are very few organizations in the company that actually are connected to so many things.
100%. Yeah.
And to me, that's what attracted me there. There was an opportunity in HR operations where I had to, like many people, you get skills that are transferable, and you have to look for that insertion point that can allow you to do that. And I started in HR ops, and ever since I've been in HR, and I love
Yeah.
it, and I probably will be there
A long time.
for the rest of my career.
It's no surprise though, because everything you've just said about your passion for your customers and delivering the value, making life easier, that's completely fully transferable. Now you have your internal stakeholders, your external stakeholders, your customers, and everything you've done is fully transferable. Yes, you still have to learn the technical elements of HR, but the skills are very transferable. You can learn the rest.
Exactly.
Yeah, as well. And you've lived and breathed the business. You were on the front line talking to customers every day. Every day for years. So when people say, HR, you need to know the business. Yes, you know how the P&L works, but you're one step further where you've actually had those conversations. You understand the pain points, the frustrations as well. So no surprise that you went on to be successful in the role.
Well, thank you, Chris. And in today's world, right? I mean, we're still in a world where companies, the way companies work is you're here to make money and hopefully make a difference as well in many aspects, including many aspects of the world, right? And increasingly, that's going to be the case. I see HR. If you think back about 2008, the financial crisis that started in the US and then spread out to the rest of the world, that was really the time for finance. Right? Like finance leaders really had an opportunity to help companies navigate through that. It was tough.
It's continuing, to be honest. It hasn't ended yet. Last year and this year.
Yeah. And last year with the pandemic, right? So March 2020, people go into lockdown in many countries. That is the time for HR. It was already starting to be the time for HR with a lot of technical digital transformation, but then the pandemic really accelerated this. And I really, I'm very happy to be in HR in many ways. And I feel that for anyone who is looking for a career, this is a great place to be. You get to influence changes that are beyond what you do in your own company.
Mm-hmm. What would you say are some of the positive ways that we can look back on over the past 15 months where we've sort of capitalized on the opportunity to reinvent work?
I'm going to take a broader view, Chris, thinking a little bit beyond what I do. If I look back, and regardless of what people think politically speaking, etc., technically speaking, some of the things that have been done in the world, especially with the discovery of the vaccine, the implementation of the vaccine, even the supply chain associated with this, right? So think about this for how quickly that went. That has never happened in the past, right? In human history.
Yes.
So the speed at which people were able to collaborate beyond boundaries, beyond the political spectrum, etc., that is just something that, to me, I look back, I'm like, wow, it's amazing. And it really say one thing, right? When people want to be focused and when they want to solve a problem, you can do it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm hopeful that some of these learnings can be used, in other aspects of what, the bigger problems that we're trying to solve as humans, right? So you think about diseases and climate change, etc.
Yeah, it shouldn't take a pandemic for those shifts to happen, right?
Exactly. And then the future of work, it's kind of interesting because you have a lot of companies that have found themselves into having no choice, right? So tech companies, obviously, companies that are lucky enough to have people working remotely, working from home, had to figure out how to make that work. And in many ways, I think for HR and for IT and for other parts of any organization, it's been the opportunity for them to think together, okay, how do we make that work faster? So related to the future of work, in my mind, people ask a lot, what is it going to be like? Is it all going to be remote? Is it going to be hybrid? Is it going to be back in the office again? And I don't think there's an easy one size fits all answer. For sure, things are changing and are going to change, right? So the 5 days a week in the office, everyone always in the office, that's probably not coming back unless you have to be physically there, right? And there are some jobs where that still is the case, and we shouldn't forget that. But generally speaking, the acceleration of technology and how we look at the work also, how people do the work. So often people are in a physical, there's a reason at the beginning, right? We've been in physical locations because we're, as human beings, we collaborate, we talk to each other, etc. And it's still needed. But often it's because a lot of the work is either not documented or not automated, digitized or digitalized. So the workflows are not figured out. That's often the reason as to why people have to be together.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because a lot of the most successful companies who've been doing remote work, like GitLab, for example, for many, many years, one of the things that the executives said to me immediately when I said, what's the advice? They say, document everything. They're like, you have to document every single thing and have that available, everything, like everything, which is one of the things that companies get, struggle with when they go hybrid or fully remote.
And you're right. And it's hard because what is the right balance, right? And often documenting everything is difficult.
But in a simple way, right? You don't want to be over. Yeah,
exactly. Right. Like what's the right balance? As people do that, as work become more automated, or you leverage more technology, then more of the work can be done anywhere, right? It doesn't matter. And then what's interesting to me for the future of work is, okay, what is really necessary for people to come together? When do you come together and for what, right? And certainly there are needs for that. There are some companies obviously that are fully remote, but it's more a minority. But there are times at which, okay, we're going to have to be together, but for sure, you don't need to be like in a commute every morning at 7 o'clock or 8 a.m. And then back at the end of the day, right? So it's really finding the balance. So to me, that's what is really exciting, is how do you evolve that? And some companies have been doing that. When I was at Cisco, I know they are accelerating this. I've always known people being remote. I've always known people being hybrid, and for sure the company is selling and was selling products to do that. So it's not a new thing.
You're right. I think it's just on a bigger scale, which we're finding it now. Most companies' structures, policies, processes aren't designed. Right. You mentioned earlier, one size fits all. We've realized that doesn't work. The one size fits all, that's exactly what we don't want to happen. But in order for us to create the same way we customize our customer experience, and we need to do that for our employees. We've been doing this for many, many years with our customers, but not with our own employees, to be able to do that. So we can do it. It's the big shift. We're going to need to move from, policies to principles, right? And have that trust with our employees. We're going to need to empower our line managers and our leaders to make decisions and have those conversations with their teams, right? Instead of having an overall policy for the business. It doesn't work because you can't have a policy for every situation. It doesn't make sense to be able to do that.
You mentioned something really important, Chris. You mentioned the people managers, right? So the people leaders, that's number one. And number two, you can have a policy for everything. And we need people to be very agile.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that includes people managers for sure, first. And how do they adjust to some situations? How do they lead teams that are hybrid? What does that mean, right? Like when you have a team that...
they need the support and training because it's tough. It's much more tougher to manage a hybrid team than an in-office team. It's so difficult.
It is. And often it's, how do you help people navigate through that, right? So people have different level of experiences, both professional, but also what they have experienced in different companies. So if you're early in career, what do you need, right? How do you learn from your peers? How do you learn from others? If you're later in career, your needs might be a little bit different. Your team might be distributed, right? So it's one thing to be working from home and in the office. It's another thing also to have a team that's distributed across regions and continents. And it's a very, it's a matrix that people need to be able to be comfortable to work with. And it's just going to increase, right? That's not going away.
What type of talent do you think is going to be required for organizations to, become and remain successful as we shift to hybrid work?
Several things, and it may, obviously there would be some variation depending on the type of job that you do, but generally speaking, so I mentioned agility, right? So someone who can, if I take a step back, right? So your practical skills, like your core skills, if you're an engineer or if you're in HR, etc., obviously you need to know about your trade. But more importantly, people talk about soft skills, right? So to me, being agile, how do you adjust? How do you react to things? How do you make things work into a different environment? And changes will happen. It's the only thing that we know that is constant, right? Just to paraphrase a lot of people. So agility is an important thing. The other thing is, to me, the ability to think both short and long term. And that's really important. So the ability to think strategically, what do we need to, what is our strategy for the next 3-5 years, but also what do we need to do in the short term and on a regular basis to achieve that. And, in a world where things can change and rapidly, people tend to run to the fire, right? Like, there's a problem, there's a need. Okay, I'm going to go work and fix it, which is great, right? We need people to be able to do that. And, for example, be able to fix or to help customers in a crisis situation. At the same time, that can also put people in a situation where they forget to think about the long term. So the agility, the ability to think both short term and long term, to me is really important. And that's in any type of job, right? And obviously, that last one that I mentioned increases as you become, as you go up, right, in your career.
I was about to say, for me, that was a big wake up call. As I don't think I was doing enough of that as CEO here, because when the pandemic hit, and 80% of our revenue was tied to face-to-face activities, i.e., our events. I didn't see that as a, now I'm thinking, well, we need to have have multiple revenue streams, and the organization itself, like we need to think about that and have a digital product, a physical product, etc., to make sure we can navigate uncertainty as best we can and prepare, as opposed to, I never thought that the entire world would close down, but as I don't think anyone predicted that, or maybe there's a few people, but our business model was not prepared for that. We were caught out, and many of my competitors no longer exist because of that.
There you go, right? So talk about change, and you were able to adjust really quickly. You remind me actually of early in the pandemic, I was listening to an interview of folks and the CEO at Airbnb, right? They were, talk about change for them.
Of course, same, yeah,
right? Like, all of a sudden, people can go
gone.
places. What do you do?
Yeah,
and that's what we call market transitions, right? And sometimes technology transitions. So, the other aspect to me is being technologically savvy, right? So is another skill,
100%,
regardless of what you do.
That's the only reason we're here, by the way. I feel like if I didn't have the understanding of the digital element in terms of the live streaming, creating digital products, all of those skills, video editing in general, because now we had to go online, right? And with this whole virtual studio, we had this because of the podcast. If we didn't have this skill set, like many of our competitors didn't, they couldn't transition their workshops, their events, conferences digitally quick enough. We wouldn't have been here. So yeah, I'm happy that when people say that you're a geek, it's like a big compliment. Like, great.
It's great.
It's good. Yeah, exactly.
There's a, so I'm going to say something, Chris, and I didn't come up with this, right? Actually, it was my former CEO when I was at Cisco who came up with that, right? He used to say, every company will be a tech company. And meaning, so unless you're an artist, maybe, and even if you're an artist today, right? Like
NFTs.
Right?
Think about NFTs, the artwork, right? The artwork being sold for NFTs, huge. You never would have thought that it would all of a sudden become a digital marketplace for art, right? In that way.
And to me, so back to your question, one last thing, or at least one thing that is big for me when I talk to people, whether it's candidates or people internally, the ability to be a systems thinker. It's not just technology, it's process, it's how an organization works, how an organization is organized, how, what type of decisions are being made, how are decisions being made, etc.
Would you still class that as a soft skill?
So part of it is obviously being a designer. But part of it is, if you think, it's a good question, Chris, like less and less organizations today are being like monolithic, and it's more like those networks.
Yes.
So you still have structures, obviously, but how people collaborate is different, right? It's across.
Yeah, a big topic right now for our community is organizational network analysis. As you can imagine, a huge topic right now. So I get it.
Topic, right? And to me, associated with that comes soft skills, right? Because how do you collaborate with others? How do you influence others? How do you help others where you might not have like the classic authority model over? And even though I would argue that even in an authoritative model, you still need to be able to influence and inspire and motivate people. So to me, that's a big aspect as well of the future of work.
Within your own organization, then obviously you're very technology driven as part of the organization. How have you embraced technology in your organization for greater personalization and flexibility for your own employees?
It's interesting, and not necessarily speaking on behalf of Pure, but when I started at Pure, we used to be very often in the office, and quite frankly, it was a very fun environment. We were not in when I was at Cisco, we were, I was here in the Bay Area, so it was more like of a classic technology company campus with all kinds of perks, etc. So it was a very different experience than Pure. When I moved to Pure, our headquarters is actually in a downtown area in Mountain View. So we're like in several buildings on the main street. And when you go from one place to another, for example, it was very frequent when I had to go from one meeting to another, I would just walk up and down the street. And you have cafes, you have restaurants, etc. So people tended to be very often in the office, especially jobs that tend to collaborate quite a bit, design, engineers, etc. But ever since, we obviously went working from home as a result of the pandemic, but ever since, a lot of people have been working from home. We are going to be hybrid, right? Like we're still centered around an office when it comes to collaboration, but people have embraced it, and it can be, for some people it's easy or easier, I would say. For others it's also difficult, right? So it's not a no-brainer. I was speaking with a leader the other day. People I've seen in all kinds of companies, right? People can burn out, as you know, and you move from a place where you have like more of a classic, you go to the office, you have a commute, etc., and you have these natural breaks. And then people work from home and they're in front of their computers all the time in front of their screens,
Yeah.
no breaks in between, and no commute, no natural break, etc. So adjusting to this, right? How do you actually adjust, even as an individual? So you talk about skills, right? Like future, hybrid
That's
work.
one of those, right? Yeah.
Yes, that's one of them, right? And it's a very different way of operating personally and as a team. And we need to be able to make those differences and, you know, create these natural breaks, create these times and points during the day where you can actually recharge. So it's a very so we're embracing it, but we'll still be, we're never going to be a remote only company. We'll be hybrid. We are already, and some people have started to go back to the office, and it also varies by region, right? So that's another thing. It's not a one size fits all.
Exactly. If you're a global business, and most of the leaders I speak to, they're like, Chris, it's so difficult because every different country I work with has different stages
Yes.
of where they are as well. So again, it's very tough
It's
to navigate.
It's an opportunity for all of us in HR.
Yeah, definitely. How do you think this is going to affect company culture? We see a lot of companies who are demanding employees to return back using or stating that we're an in-office culture. It seems to be the headline, right? So that's the reason why we're all coming back to the office, and they're worried about losing that stickiness, right? That glue that kind of holds everyone together that you get by seeing and feeling the workplace and being in person. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question, Chris. To me, culture can be shaped in different ways, right? And for sure, historically, the office has helped because people are physically together. The reality is, even if you thinking back, even pre-pandemic, people were not always in the office, right? Like people have been working hybrid in many ways, in many companies. And your culture is really, in my mind, is really based on, it's obviously not just the leaders that define the culture, but it's also how employees work together. But it's really about what do we value? What do we care as a company? And how do we walk our values? How do we reward people? What do we put on the pedestal, right? What do we actually consider success? Culture can be developed in very distributed ways. So meaning it doesn't have to be in one physical space. So how would it impact companies? I do think for some companies it would be more difficult than others because they are going to have to learn through it. But in many ways, companies have had, many companies haven't fully gone back into the office yet. Some are starting. So by the time many companies have stated, hey, we'll go back early 2022. And that's what we've said, actually, even though our offices are open. But like truly like bringing back together post, everybody's waiting for herd immunity, obviously, right, to do that.
Do we get herd immunity, though, if everyone's vaccinated?
Well, that's another question. Right? And how we get there, if we get there, is also a different question. But, to me, like companies have had almost 2 years of training wheels on this.
That's true.
Almost. So I do think people are going to get there. And in a way, it's like everything, right? Your customers, like if you're a company, you have customers, external customers, but your employees are also customers, and your candidates are customers. So people are also voting with their feet, right? So when I speak with candidates, right, like flexibility is important, and the ability to they want, more importantly, I think, to me, companies that will be winning are the ones that obviously have a great business strategy, have a great story to tell about the type of work that you do, and what you're able to offer to employees to develop themselves. But also people who are going to be able to be very clear on what their culture is about and what it's not. To me, it's a very important topic right now.
Yeah,
we're having that discussion too. Where I am today,
It's interesting,
critical.
right? Because it's forcing companies almost to do that, because culture is no longer a fancy office, with a slide
Exactly.
and a table tennis table. And and those people aren't coming into interviews now asking those questions. The number one question is, what's the, can I work remote? Or what is your policy, right, on remote work? Like, that's the number. Are you hearing the same thing? Is that the number one
Yeah.
question from candidates,
Well,
right?
it's definitely one of the questions.
Yeah,
Yes.
and the second one is probably around why, purpose, values. Yeah, exactly, right. Whereas in the past, we wasn't having those type of conversations. It was like, office, where's it located, and what's my benefits and
Exactly.
salary,
And we're
right?
beyond that.
And yeah, we're beyond that, right? People, and it's so interesting to see, because I thought it would take us a lot longer to get to that point. It's one of the reasons why I quit my job and started this business, is that I just didn't have any fulfillment in my previous job. I was like, why am I doing this? Just because? And whereas now the new generation, I wouldn't say I think not just the new generation, I think everyone, I think we all had a lot of time to think over the last 18 months and think, do I really want to do this? Is this really, it's a big wake up call for everyone as well.
Yeah,
So those organizations that can lean into that and effectively communicate their why, their purpose, what it means to work at this organization, they're going to win. And those companies that say those values and don't back it up will also be found out.
That's right.
As well. They can't hide anymore.
You can't hide. And, you said something really important, Chris, like people have time to think. And that's true. And think about what they value, what is important to them. And so do companies, right? Like, from a strategy perspective, it's, thinking about your customers, also how you solve problem for your customers. So back to the purpose and how it connects to other things in the world, right? Like, is your company helping move the needle in terms of bigger problems in society, right? And it doesn't have to be political, right? It can be technical issues. It can be supply chain challenges, right? It can be environmental, right? It can be ESG. ESG is becoming a big component.
So what does that stand for? Apologies.
Environmental, essentially everything that has to do with the environment.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Okay. I've never heard of the acronym. That's fine. No, I get it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like what you see in many CHROs that I work with now have that CSR responsibility.
Yes.
It's kind of intertwined,
Social
and I feel like it
right?
makes sense.
And in that case, right? So your companies talk about. I mean, that's part of what you hear when you hear about net zero, right? Going carbon neutral, etc. Right? So how do you, as a company, how do you actually make a difference or participate into all of those things at the society level? So to me, it's important. It's the purpose. We actually did. I did some research on this. There's been so much published over the past year and a half. It's actually pretty amazing. Like the amount of work that people have done, and great work. And you talked about generations. People care about purpose, right? So, and it's true between Gen X and Gen Z and millennial, etc. People have you can see the differences, right? People are starting to care a lot more about issues that impact them and impact people as a group and as a society. So to me, connecting to the purpose is really important. And but more importantly, we all have customers, and to me, and companies, like technical companies, sometimes it can be difficult. Like, how do you connect what you do on a day-to-day basis?
In terms of looking forward, what are you most excited about? And at the same time, what are you most concerned about over the next 12 to 18 months?
Some of the things that I'm most excited about is the difference that we can make as HR leaders with overall businesses. I strongly believe that the opportunity that we have is shaping. We talked about the future of work, so shaping that, helping leaders and helping companies be more productive, helping employees be more productive, find a greater purpose, right? Like, and when I say productive, it's it's not about working more.
It's
It's
about
about
fulfillment.
work. Yeah, it's about working smarter, right?
Hmm.
And it's kind of a buzzword, but I do believe in that, right? Is how do you, if anything, the past year and a half has showed us that there are things that we're not doing efficiently, and we can do a lot better and faster, and probably um, not waste as much time. So I'm excited about this. I also, you look at you look at HR and the technology in HR. It's very interesting. Like it's super fragmented in the market. Like the amount, if you're an HR leader, whether you look at N&D or you look at comp, you look at your core HR operation technology, look at people analytics, you have so many vendors.
Yeah, it's a minefield.
It's a minefield, right? It's pretty
Yeah.
amazing. I compare that, like in my line of business, beyond HR, I would compare that to the security business. Like if you look at the IT stack, so storage, compute, networking, security is extremely fragmented. HR is in a very similar place. So I get really excited about potentially things that can be done with technology for HR and for people, generally speaking, and the connection with IT, the connection with finance, the connection with the rest of the business. So I'm like super excited about this. There are a lot of companies that are coming up with a lot of ideas. Again, it's very fragmented, but I can see that um, over time, we're going to have tools that can help employees and businesses to be more creative, to be more productive, to think about their career even differently, and to get things done that we couldn't get done before. You asked me earlier about the skills that I believe were important. So system thinking, connecting the dots, right? So to me, the technology
And you think that's a
is,
core skill that a CHRO and HR leader will have to have as well?
oh yeah, absolutely. It's probably a one of the top fives in my mind.
Hmm.
It's got
Definitely.
to be
I agree. I agree.
like the partnership between the CHRO, the CIO, even the CFO, right? Like that that trio to me is really important. And there's more, right? I mean, because things
Of
are
course.
changing.
Yeah.
Data is another one, right? Like data strategy and the people. Obviously, people data plays a big role, but how do you devise a strategy across the company that encompasses your customer data, your employee data, your partner data, etc., and use that to create a competitive advantage. Like HR can provide that. It's still, when I think about people analytics, it's a, and I'm not necessarily an expert, but I know enough to be dangerous. There are a lot of good things that are happening. I mean, we move from manual to some automation to some predictive, but even the companies that are doing predictive modeling and more importantly, what do you do with it? How do you use it? Like how do you create an advantage to it? Is not there yet, right? I would compare that to self-driving cars. Like as an analogy, we talk a lot about self-driving
That's a good
cars,
one.
and
Yeah.
but they are not there yet, like completely driving in the
Yeah. I've
streets.
got my Tesla, but I'm still not sitting in the back seat getting driven around. it's,
Good for you.
it's a long way to go.
It's an amazing car, right? Like and think about like changing the paradigm on it's not a cab company, it's a software company essentially. Um,
Yeah, I remember when I first heard Elon Musk say we're not a car company, we're a software company, and I was like, wow. Right, it just it's so true.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm excited about this. I'm and then generally speaking, so for HR there, and how can we help companies, achieve their goals, right? So the HR leader in my mind is, I often hear people say, oh, people in HR sometimes can talk about we're helping the business. No, wait, we are the
Oh, the
business.
business. Yeah. They've already lost by using that language.
So to me, there's a big opportunity there. And then, I'm excited to like more broadly. Um, I mentioned that a little bit earlier, what has happened with COVID and some of the technology there, right? So the biotechnology, vaccines, I think we're at the tipping point of a change here. like technologically speaking. I recall when I was in college, I studied biology. So when things started to move with the COVID vaccine, I got really excited. Like, wow, like it took like 20, 30 years for people to start figuring out, okay, what do we do with this? And I think what has happened with COVID and how quickly we've developed a vaccine as a society, even though not everyone is benefiting from it just yet, can be applied elsewhere. So I get excited about this. Like I strongly believe that there are bigger problems that are going to be solved. What do I get worried about, or what am I concerned? It goes back a little bit to the short-term versus long-term thinking, right? Like we got on top of the pandemic because there was a clear and present danger, right? And it was like short-term,
and it affected everyone,
and it affected everyone.
Yeah,
bingo, right? So it's sometimes I'm thinking like, okay, because it affected everyone, then people rally. So I'm hopeful, but also being pragmatic that, okay, is that really what it takes, right, for us to solve some bigger problems?
Yeah.
And
before I let you go, I want to sort of jump into our quick fire round, if that's okay. So I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready?
All right, and you keep me on track in the 30 seconds.
Yeah. What was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a senior HR executive?
I think it was probably my own thinking, right? It's in you, right? It's up to you to really jump in and make your mark and solve problems. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
One of the best pieces of advice is when I started in HR, I had a mentor who's still an HR leader and professional in the industry. And I mentioned I started in HR ops, and it's a she, and she mentioned her name is Nicole Grogan, and she said, hey, Arnaud, if you want to do something in HR, you have to go into client facing, and meaning like HR business partnership type of work. And to me, that was probably one of the best pieces of advice.
Yeah. And I think another piece of advice, which you just indirectly mentioned, is get a mentor.
Exactly. Right. And thank you.
Yeah.
Which is trust others, right? And really learn from experiences.
Yeah. What are some books you'd recommend to our audience, and why?
I'm reading several things right now. There's one actually that I haven't started yet, but I'm still going to recommend it because I think it's going to be a good book. Is called I have it here.
You grab it. There we go.
There you go. Work Quick by Steve Cadigan.
Nice.
So that's
a really good title of a book, by the way. Side note. Yeah.
There's another book that I'm reading that is called Rescue, and it's all about like solving bigger problems for the world.
What are some online resources that you use to stay up to date with current events?
All right, you're gonna find a bunch of them. I enjoy reading newspapers, and from all type of backgrounds. So regardless of the political background, so you will find newspapers. You will find HBR, Harvard Business Review. Lots of awesome content. I really enjoy it. Obviously, I'm going to promote your podcast. Right? So you're on the website.
Thank you.
I really enjoy like financials and economy. So I go to CNBC. I also use that quite a bit. So I have a number of sources, but definitely newspapers such as The Economist. So in the UK, I read French newspapers as well. US, Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal.
Fantastic. And then last question, what's one thing about your current business that you're most excited about moving forward?
We're on the path to really, we've disrupted the storage industry. So Pure has, and I know we're reinventing storage, right? And we're trying to make storage invisible to our customers, so it becomes seamless. So I'm really excited about what we're doing, not only technologically speaking, but also how people consume storage. And I'm really excited about the fact that we're also thinking about different personas, right? So back to not a one size fits all. Who consumes storage and how they consume it today and in the future is very different than when it was 10 years ago. So I'm excited about this, right? Like it's a constant change, and I'm excited about taking on our competitors.
Amazing. Well, look, thank you so much for taking the time to join me on the show. It's been a real pleasure. Last question: if people want to reach out to you and connect with you, where can they reach you?
LinkedIn is the best.
Amazing. We'll link that below. Well, look, thanks for joining us. And I'll let you get back to your day because you're in California. You're just starting your day. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I'll see you again soon. All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Same here. And great meeting you.
Thanks.